Hello and welcome to the next video where we are going to be talking about one of the most important things whenever it comes to programming, namely tests. The harsh truth is actually all the code that you write is only worth as much as the test that you have written for it. They are the only tool that really will tell whether your code holds up and that it has been really checked against every possible situation that is there to really break things out. So tests are very important, and those are, let's say, the most annoying thing to work with in the beginning, but then as you get better, then of course you will like the tests more and more. So tests, we already know that they are just there to test things out, as the name suggests, so just checking whether our code works properly with different inputs. Let's talk a little bit about what are the types of tests first. So there are three main types of tests, and as a programmer, we're really going to be looking mostly at the first two. So those types are unit tests, the easiest tests to write, the smallest ones actually. They are the ones that are just there to test out a specific service without the usage of all the services. I will show in just a second how it looks like on a graph, but that will come in a second. Integration tests. Integration tests are actually tests that are there to check communication between two or more services and whether they are communicating with each other properly, and to check whether the outcome of those services is really what we expect. So for example, it could be a connection to the database, to the REST API, also, or some other things. Then we've got end-to-end tests, which are pretty unique. And why are they unique? They're unique in a way that they are testing out everything. As the name suggests, they are end-to-end, meaning that we are testing the front end, we are testing the database, we are testing whether everything is working well, just connected together. They are the most costly to actually maintain because we need a real-life application to really test it out. Those are meant to be done on an application that is as close to what our end users or customers see to in real life. So end-to-end tests, likely as a programmer, you won't really need to implement any end-to-end test, but of course it can happen. But for the most part, I would say that majority of end-to-end tests in your company are going to be done by testers. Why is that? It is a very complicated thing to do, first of all. Second of all, if you are talking about automated tests, not manual tests, because you can, of course, go ahead and click through everything, but then the bigger the scale, of course, then the easier it will be to just automate it. So there will be dedicated people who have the knowledge about the technologies needed to actually build out end-to-end tests. So most likely, as a programmer, you will be taking care of the unit tests and integration tests. So let's talk a little bit about rules for test writing. So each class has a corresponding test class in dedicated test space. What this suggests is that whenever we're creating a test, they are separate from the production code. So we are introducing a kind of a separation between the test that we write and the code that is actually contributing to building out the application that we have. So the test code is entirely separate from what we actually have in the production code. So if we are talking about tests, each class has a corresponding test class, meaning that we just create a class dedicated to testing out this class. For example, for unit tests and for testing out the integration between specific parts, then we also create a specific class for it. And also a disclaimer, in this part we will be talking mostly about unit tests. Integration tests will be actually talked through later on when we already know how to build projects, how to use outside libraries, and how to actually write out code that is using multiple things within it so that we have something to integrate with. So with that being said, let's move forward. We test happy paths, but negative paths are more important. So what I actually mean by that is we test happy paths, meaning that we test out things which are happening when everything is working properly, the user input is okay, and there is no problems, no issues. But we also test out negative paths because those are the more important ones, meaning that what happens whenever there is something wrong with our code, with the input that we get. Then we don't test boilerplate code like getters, setters, constructors, etc. to strings, because it doesn't really make sense. Those are so-called boilerplate. They're required by Java, but they are not really something that needs testing. And then, last but not least, each test must be independent, meaning that no matter what is the order of the tests that you create them or run them, they should all work the same. So it really shouldn't matter whether you are running test 1 and then test 2, or test 2 and then test 1, right? They need to be independent from each other. Otherwise, we are going to run into some nasty issues as we try to run the test, and their effect is essentially something that is not true. So yeah, that's pretty much it about the rules of the testing. Let's dive a little bit deeper on how does it visually look like when we are talking about tests. So unit tests, actually, the way they work is that we've got a service and then we've got a dedicated test class. You can treat the items that I have here on this presentation as the services are separate classes, and then of course the tests are also separate test classes. So each service has a corresponding class, in which there are methods where we are testing all the test cases that we can think of. So all the happy paths and all the negative paths. Then, if we are talking about integration tests, right, we've got a bigger service that is coupling two services within it, and then of course using the outcome of it. So this connection is actually within the specific test class that we are using, not per service, but per the integration between those. Very, very important distinction. Then, last but not least, are end-to-end tests, where on the one side we've got a manual or automatic tester that is going to be using the front-end part of the application to communicate with the application to check whether everything is working properly. So you can imagine that, for example, in e-commerce, if we are testing out Amazon, how it would look like is that the tester would just go and try to add items to their basket, try to buy them, try to go back, try to really go through all the paths that usually end user would go through. So those are the most complicated ones and actually require the most amount of work to properly develop. So yeah, that's it about the theory, about what tests are, what are the types, and what we'll be working on. So to reiterate, we are going to be mostly talking about unit tests within those lessons that we have here right now. And integration tests will come later. And as a programmer, realistically speaking, you will not need to learn a lot about end-to-end tests, because most likely there will be a dedicated team for it, and you won't be the one doing the end-to-end tests due to how complicated they are and the fact that you need to learn separate technologies to actually be able to write proper automated end-to-end tests. And for manual ones, you also need to know what to look for. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the theory part. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to really set up your environment for tests and how to write out unit tests. Afterwards, we're going to be talking about TDD, so test-driven development, a very useful tool for novice programmers and even experienced ones to really think through the application that you're creating. With that being said, thank you very much and see you in the next video.